Hey, hello everyone. My name is Yunwei Wang. I'm the deputy project lead for the Inferno project. So I will be your instructor for today's Let's Build session. So shall we start?
Yeah, I think we're good to go.
Okay, thanks everyone. So let's first look today's agenda. So first we're going to spend a few minutes to go over some overviews about the Inferno documentation and the Inferno template structures. And then we're going to spend most time on building your first Inferno testing application. The purpose for this Let's Build session is to like you, the attendees, to do this. Well, I'm showing the steps. So in order to do that, so first you need to have some kind of environment set up so that on your local machine, so that you can run all the codes, all the steps. Well, it's actually pretty straight, simple. The only thing you need is a Docker container. You can easily get a Docker like what I use the Docker desktop. So that's a very good UI tools where you can use whatever Docker library you want. And if you don't have a Docker on your laptop, no matter Windows, Mac, due to some limitation, then we prepared GitHub Inferno code space. Sorry, GitHub code space. No Inferno, GitHub code space for you to use on GitHub. Then all we need is your GitHub username. So if you prefer to use the GitHub code space, please PM the panel with your GitHub username so we can add you to the code space for this Let's Build session. Now, first, I'm going to go over some Inferno repositories about what we offered. So let's go to browser. So we have a repository on the GitHub and the Inferno framework, Inferno template. If you don't remember these, you can easily come in from the inferno.healthit.gov. And on the page, on the left side, if you are familiar with, have used the Inferno tools before, you know, all the testing applications are on the left side. On the right side, there's an Inferno development framework. And here, there's a link, says GitHub here. If you click link, it's going to the same Inferno template repository. So other than the Inferno template, just to show what others repository we also provide in the Inferno project. On the top, you can see the template, which is all the Inferno testing application built on top of the template. And then another one is also pinned is the Inferno core. That is the main library for Inferno testing applications. So again, all the Inferno testing application reference will import this library. And there's under here, there's some other repositories that we have, like a UI Core test kit, which is a very complicated testing application for US Core 3.11 and US Core 4.0. We are adding US Core 5.01 support into this repository at this time, I mean, in the next few weeks. Also, you're going to see like a Inferno reference server. This is a Happy-based file server that they support right now. It support US Core 3.11 dataset. We are adding US Core 4.0 and US Core 5.01 in the near future. Also, you can see also we have some test application for other implementation guide like IPS, the International Patient Summary Test Kit. So you can find a lot of useful library and useful test kit for in the Inferno framework. I think called organization at Inferno, under Inferno framework. Okay, so next we are going to talk about a little bit about the Inferno documentation. So we are going to use this documentation pretty frequently during this today's live build session. But also, if you run your own Inferno application, you're going to reference or check those documentation pretty often. You'll find them pretty handy. So you can guide the documentation. Let's go back to the Inferno template repository. If you scroll down, there's 3 documentation mentioned here. The first is I'll open all 3 of them. We need to open one by one. So the first is the Inferno documentation. This is basically you can think this is as your recipe for creating Inferno application. It gives like an overview, how do you get start, and like how do you write tests, and how to distribute your tests, how to deploy. So this is an overall recipe about create Inferno application. Right here, I will spend a little bit time talking about the structure of Inferno testing application, because sometimes it's get confused by the on the user community about what we talk about when we say test group or when we say test. So Inferno has 3 levels. You can think class or groupings. On the very top, the topmost container is called the test suite. So each test application is a test suite. And so it's a executable set of tests that the Inferno core can run. And under test suite, there's multiple test groups. Test group is a logic grouping of some tests for the similar purpose. For example, in the US core, we can group all the tests related to patient together, call it a patient group. And also we can group tests for some related to US core guidance, for example, the clinical document guidance. So we can group tests related to that into clinical guidance, clinical documentation guidance test group. So the test group is a logic organization of several tests for the similar purpose. And finally, at the fundamental level, there's an individual test. A test is something that is going to have some action, either do request to the server, read a resource from the server, or search on the server, etc. So it do some action, and then it checks the result and decide if the action is success or fail. There's a more status also in between, like skip, omit, etc. warning. But basically, 2 main is if the test is the action is success or the action is a failure. So this is a documentation for the Inferno, and the second documentation we are going to use today, and also if you write your test, it's going to be very handy, is the Ruby documentation. Especially, we're going to pay very special attention to this part called the Inferno DSL, the domain-specific language. This is include all the class that the Inferno test may use to say send a request, to validate, to do the assertion, to how to run a configuration, etc., how to see the result. So this the can think this is an API documentation, functional documentation for the Inferno core data. And the third documentation we are not going to use today is the Inferno JSON API. So this is a Swagger documentation. So Inferno does have a run as a backend service, web service. So this is specifically designed for those who already have their own testing application, but the implementer want to interact or delegate certain tasks to Inferno testing, and so you can start test using the Inferno testing and pull the result out and into their own testing application. So this is what they can use, how to interact with the Inferno Web Service JSON API. But we're not going to use this one today. So these are the overview of the documentation. And next, we're going to look at what does the Inferno template look like. Yeah, by the way, when doing my presentation or tutorial, because we want this to be as most interactive as possible. So if you have any question, you can raise your hand, or you can post the question into the chat. So we're going to help you to answer all the questions.
Yeah, and they've everybody's been given the ability to speak as well. So
Okay.
you can simply unmute yourself and
Yep.
and interject. Yeah.
Okay. Or you can just say, stop, I have a question. Yeah. So let's look at the file structure for the Inferno template repository. So from the top, there's first is the config. This is where the configuration for the web service and database service is. And the data folder is where the database saves its data. So Inferno does use a SQLite database as a default to save the test result, all the test related data, the sessions, request response, errors, warnings. So it all saved in this SQLite database. I think it is possible to replace that with any other relational database. You can do that through configuration, but by default, it's running a SQLite. And then the next is a lib folder or library folder. This is where the test code exists, and this is the main folder we are going to work on today. And then we also have a unit test saved in the spec folder. So if you want to run some unit tests, you can specify the unit test here. And then in the root folder, there's a lot of configurations, the environment variable, like where the validator service runs after deployment, in the Docker. So in most cases, you don't need to change that. But in some scenario that if you want to run service in a very specific port, then you can change, you can update it here. And also we have the, like say the Docker file. So this is how the Docker is created. And the germ file, the germ is a Ruby's equivalent of a library, what's called the library in C, C++, or C# or Java. So this is the basic regulate how the to create the Inferno as a library, or how to use other libraries in the Inferno term. Yeah, I'll say I don't, in 99% of the time, I don't even bother to change those files because the default setting works fine. Also the Docker compose. And here is a two script that we're going to use today. First is a setup.sh. This is like you how to set up the whole Docker environment for the to run the Inferno template. And run.sh is to to start the Docker, so to run the script or to run the Inferno template, so you can access it from the browser. So this is just a roughly introduction about what the Inferno template looks like. Again, in most situation scenarios, you don't need to make any update to those environment variable or config folder or data folder, because it just use it as a default. It's going to run perfectly. If you have some very special situation, like certain port is blocked, or the operating system has a certain restriction, then you may need to go into one of these configurations to make changes. But we are not going to go that far today. So we'll just use the default. Now, we are going to start the actual build session. So we have 6 steps. The first, we're going to guide how to guide the template into your local. Before we start, first, just everyone has your environment ready, or has the code space running.
That is everybody that wants to follow along.
Yeah. So we have 6 steps to guide the. First, we're going to guide the source code, the code into your dev environment, and then going to load the implementation guide, and we're going to run the Inferno template the first time. Then we're going to show how do we some basic stuff, like how do we add access token, because some server requires the request to have a token to be there. And also, how do we expand this template a little bit? How do we do a search? And then how do we do a validation of the search result? So 6 simple steps. I'm going to use Visual Studio to show you how to do these things. And but you can use any your preferred editor to do that. If you use a code space, congratulations, this already has a built-in Visual Studio in the code space. And at the end of each step, I will leave like several minutes for you to finish the work and to ask questions about or if you have a difficulty to complete the step. So to give you some time to ask questions. So let's start. The first thing is we want to, this is Inferno is in a GitHub. So we want to guide the code into our local environment to start. So if you click here, click code, there's several ways to get that. One is the simplest way is to actually copy the URL, and then you can open a terminal. You can use a terminal this. You can use either your command line or script window on your Windows or the terminal or Mac. So we'll say git clone and the URL. Well, if you do this, it's going to pull all the code into your into the Inferno template folder under the where you created. But I want to also give a name called my Inferno demo. So I say clone all the code into there. Click enter, going to create that. If you don't like to type the command line, you can use a click here, click open the GitHub desktop. Then it's going to open, well, first you need to have that installed apparently. Then it's going to give you a UI pop-up to let you basically do the same thing. So now we have the code cloned.
Hey, Yanwei, is there any way that you can zoom in a little bit?
This one? Sorry, let me see.
I don't know if that's possible. And then Igor, I think you should be able to, yeah, you should be able to like move the screen thing where the video is and even change the view to full screen.
Will be better?
View. the text is still pretty small. Maybe if you could like zoom in on your Chrome a little bit more too.
Let's see. How about now?
I would say a couple more control pluses for me.
Couple more. Okay, let me make this a little bit.
It's always the hardest thing. Command plus, control plus, depending on if you're a Mac or a
Mac is Alt plus.
maximize.
Yeah, Command plus.
Yeah. Great. Right, you're on a Mac.
So I hope everyone can see the.
That looks great. Yeah, that looks great for me. And then also when you go back to your Chrome, I think zooming in there as well would be helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, good suggestion. Sorry about that.
Oh no, it's great. Yeah. I always forget to.
Okay.
Perfect. Everything's gonna get a little squished. But...
Yeah, then I think also I need to also make this. So now I'm going to open the code. So let's say open folder.
Great. And feel free, folks, to scream if ever it's too small to read.
Here it is. And I will make this bigger too. I hope they use the same way to make it open. Okay, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit slow in response. Okay, hopefully this is big enough. Yeah, now
I'm able to read it, but if folks have any trouble, yeah.
Yeah, if you need any help, please let me know. Make it zoom more, or need me to slow down. So I'll do that. Okay, so now we have the Inferno repository cloned in my local folder, and you can see have the same structure as what's on the GitHub. So this is, as I said, this is a template, right? And when we create an Inferno application, what we want is actually testing against a certain implementation guide. But the template doesn't include any implementation guide. So we need to, the first thing we're going to do is to download the implementation guide. Okay, so the first thing, load an implementation guide. In here, in this session, we are going to use US Core 311 as an example because first that's pretty well used, also required by ONC certification, and also that's supported by our reference server. So I do have a valid data set there for you to use. So let's see, how do we guide US Core IGE? So if you don't remember the old link, just use a Google. And also make this a little bit bigger. So just use a Google US Core IGE. It's going to give you the link. And the US Core does have a, why do I need to zoom every time? So US Core does have a very several different versions, so you need to pay attention to the version. What we want is a US Core 311. So we click there's a link on the first page, a directory of published versions. So click that and scroll down, find the version we want to use, US Core 311, and click this link. Now we are going to go to the download page. And the first download is called package file. That's the one we need. So we'll just click that. It's going to start download. It's done. Now here, okay, so just use this terminal. So the first CD, my Inferno demo. Well, by the way, in the Visual Studio, it provides a terminal. So you can say terminal, new terminal. It's going to give you a terminal here. Did I say new terminal? Oh yeah, it's going to give you a terminal here, but you see it covers almost all my space. So I'll just not using this and just using separate terminals. So, but on your case, you can, if you like, you can use the terminal provided by Visual Studio. So now I'm here. I'm going to copy what I just downloaded. Download package.parse to the, we're going to put into the library and where the package, the Inferno template is, and we're going to put it into the IG. So copy the package.parse from where it's download to the lib/Inferno template/IG. Yep, it's done. So if you go here, we see under the lib folder or lab folder, there's the Inferno template. And now under the IG, you have the package.parse copied or saved here. And actually, there's the instruction say put IG package.parse here. Okay, we have done that. Well, I'll give a minute. So if you are still downloading the package and we're still trying to copy or move the file into your IG folder. And at the same time, if you have any question, please let me know.
You selected a specific version of the package, right? Is there any reason for that, or why not you select the latest one from the website?
Well, one reason is that the reference server we currently have support US core version 3.11. So that makes this tutorial much easier. So because that means I have a valid data set saved in some server. Definitely, I can choose other IGs like 501, the latest one. But that means some tests may fail because I don't have the data prepared for that. But when you create your own testing application for the certain implementation guide, you're definitely going to load what the version of the IG you want to use into the IG folder. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yep. Okay, now we have the IG loaded. Now let's go to the next step. So we're ready to run the Inferno template or the Inferno application for the first time. So the first thing we're going to do is to run the setup.sh. It's going to set up the database, going to create the Docker, prepare the Docker, sorry. And also pull all the libraries around. So just run. Well, if you are on Windows machine, you can just run the setup.sh. So it's going to run some all these tasks automatically. It create a Docker file, and it pulls create certain Dockers for the application. Now it's creating database, the SQLite database. Now it's done. So pretty straightforward. If the environment setup is correct, then you're not going to get any error. So just a straightforward. And after the setup, we're going to say run.sh. So it's going to start the Docker with the latest build. Well, you only need to run the setup once. You don't need to run the setup every time you try to start a testing. But you do need to run sh multiple times. So let's start the run.sh. Going to verify the Docker image. And now it's start Docker. It's actually the same as the Docker compose up. So when you see here, listening on HTTP 0004657, that means the Inferno container itself is up, but we are going to wait a little bit longer. It's done already, maybe. Initialize. Okay. Now let's see if this actually started. So we can go to localhost. Now we see there's the Inferno template test suite is already started. And remember the structure we talked about on the top level is the test suite. It's called the internal test suite template. And under the test suite, there's a groups. So now there's two groups. One is a test for capability statement. The other are tests for patients. So we have one test and two groups. Now we can, let's see if it's all done here. Looks like. Let's run the test. So when you run the test, it's going to ask you like what the URL is. So you need to specify a server's URL, that where your server, where you want to test. So I have a cheat sheet, which is already automatically input saved. So it's https://inferno.healthit.gov/reference-server/r4. I'm going to copy these into the chat. Open panelist. So you're going to have the reference server that you can use. But definitely, if you have your own US port server, you can put that file endpoint there. And it's also asked for patient ID because we want to test a patient. We must know what patient we want to test, right? So the patient ID is 85. We'll also type into the chat, so you know that. So now I'll click submit. And you can see the test runs. So we have one pass and one fail. Let's see what failed here. So when I look, under, again, this patient test itself is a group. Under the group, we have two tests. The first is return the patient resource from the patient read interaction. And under the test, there's several types. If you click the HTTP request, you're going to see this is the request Inferno sent to the server. It's basically read the patient 85. But server returns status 401 and authorized. That means we need a access token. But you can also click details. The detail says pair token is invalid or not supplied. So the server does require access token. But the whole service runs, so we do have a Inferno runs now. Now let's stop this one. Control C, stop it. And let's go back to here. Visual Studio Code. Let's see how do we add a token. So, well, I think the first thing we can do is go to the documentation. And in the documentation, let's say making request. And Leave it here. Third test input output. Define so we can have a input output session. So here it says that to making request, let's say making request through the access request and response. Okay, access token. Yep, it's here. Sorry about that. Yeah, this is in the file request. So here is a tells you that how do you do token. So with in the file client, you need to provide if it's a token is required. First, you provide URL that where you want to access the server, and then you can provide a token that what the token the server requests, and also you can provide headers. So if the server requires some specific header for each request, but we don't want to hard code the token here because that means that you need to. Well, I think we can hard code the token during the demo, but in reality, when you have a testing application that may connect to multiple servers, you don't want to hard code the token because that means every time you need to change the code to be able to set up the token. So instead, we're going to use the second way is use a Ruby symbol to request user input to let the tester to input the token. And then we're going to set use that as a variable to set the value of the bearer token. So let's go to the code. So this will be our first code change. In the Inferno template.rb, let me close all these warnings. And also the terminal. So here we see this is where the file client is set up. And we know that for the token, we want to say here token. And we can give a name access token. Then we see the token is input from the, we request the user to provide the token value. So you can put this for the input, this is the UI, the Inferno core going to generate a UI input element for the URL and for the access token. You can put in one line, or another way is you can put in two separate lines. It doesn't matter, both works. So make sure this variable name is correct. Now, let me save this file. And let's run this again.
You have a typo. No.
Thank you. Let me see up here. That's why I like to put it in one line. So I think that's weird. When I zoom in a lot, it's a kind of laggy. So sometimes I type faster than it's displayed here. Okay, thank you for the eagle eye. So now let's do the run.sh. Yeah, unfortunately, every time after you make change, you have to stop the Docker compose and run the run.h again. So it's going to take a little bit time for it to start. and to load more files. Yeah, the validator is always the slowest because it's a need to load the package into the memory to parse it. So the validator is always the slowest. Yep, it's done. And when I see the validator service load package.tar, I mean, that means that the validator is ready. So let's go back here into the local host. Let's run the local host. So, when I click run all tests, you see there's one more input for the token. Again, we have this server, and also I have a cheat input for the token because I already know that. I will put it into the chat, so you also know what the token is. And same patient ID. So I click submit and cross my finger, hope everything works. Yeah, the first time when you run the validation, it's going to be a little bit slow because it's need to guide the IGs and to do the validation. So it's needed, the validator service needs some time to warm up. But at least, well, actually, you see all the tests passed. I have 2 green checks. And if I click this patient test, and you see the HTTP request, now it says 200 is passed. And then click detail, here it's going to show that what is the request and what is the response. The response from the server is the patient resource. Okay.
Fantastic. And then, there are a few questions. Did you answer whether this is a post call in the
This
chat?
is a guide call. So it's because I say here is a guide. If you want to do a post call, well, can you do a post for guide a patient? I think that's a little bit strange, but we do support post on HTTP file search. So we'll see that when we do the search. And again, if you are curious about how to make all those calls, you can go to the DSL documentation, either the FAIR client or the HTTP client that gives a lot of example about how to make post calls, how to make operation calls, which we are not intended to cover today, but today we're just be the class 101, the fundamental class. And also I see someone raise their hand.
Oh yeah, if anybody raised their hand, feel free to just interject at any time.
Yeah, but my question was like, I mean, you made the call from the Ruby code, right? So you didn't declare basically the HTTP method over there. So I was just curious there.
Well, we wrapped around the HTTP method and the FAIR client and FAIR request. We have this does not use the Ruby, sorry, Inferno core delegate that to, we have another library called, I think just called Ruby FAIR model and FAIR client. Those are going to handle all the background HTTP request and response.
Got it. So basically we have the Ruby framework, and on top of Ruby, we have extended the HTTP class, and that is basically managing it. So we don't have to explicitly declare when we call from the code. Is that correct?
No, yeah, that's correct. In most situations, we're going to see, okay, we're going to see that here. So let's see for the capability statement, you can simply just call FAIR guide capability statement. It's going to give you that. And let's see, how do you do a FAIR read instead of say HTTP guide URL content header, etc., you can simply say file read, what is the resource, what is the ID, and where you want, how do you name the interaction. And I'm going to show this a little bit later, but since you asked, also if you have if you want to learn more about that, say in the section of making requests, you're going to have this say, how do you set up file client, and what is available file request method, the file read, file search. For example, if you want to know more about that, you can go to the Ruby API documentation, basically here, and it's going to tell you, like, for the file read, what's the parameter you want to use, for the file search, what the parameter you want to use. And in very rare scenario, that if the request is not file, like sometime in the, for example, in the bulk data, when you try to get the file, the actually downloaded file, it's not a file request, it's an HTTP request. So in such case, you can go to here. We also have the instruction about how do you make HTTP request using the HTTP client. But as if in most scenario, you only need to use a file client.
Thank you.
Let me see if there's any other questions.
Oh, there is one. I was going to say, so Doug asked a question, are there any plans to enable people to author custom tests for Inferno without needing as much of a technical background, especially with respect to Ruby and GitHub? And so our initial focus, right, has been on sort of creating this framework that is like extensible and sort of flexible, and focusing on sort of developers to start. So if folks have like experience with, Python or other programming languages, it should be relatively easy to sort of pick up framework. But understand that there are people who are sort of don't have technical backgrounds, may not feel comfortable sort of diving into the details of this, or don't have the time, right, to dedicate to learning a new framework, but just want to write their own tests. And so we're definitely exploring if that's a useful sort of use case for folks. It certainly would be possible to sort of make these sort of features like more abstract, right, and even create like a WSDL tool to help build out tests using the Inferno domain-specific language and stuff. So I think, I think near term it's going to be sort of developer focused and sort of programming heavy. And then in the future, we may offer some more sort of layman friendly ways to author test kits and stuff.
Thanks, Johnny. This is Doug. I think that would be very, very helpful, and appreciate your considering it.
Yeah, absolutely. And would love to hear your use case and where you're coming from, Doug, as well. Because we're always trying to figure out what to work on next.
Sure. Well, just an example use case. Say we wanted to write a new implementation guide along with HL7, or just do some implementation of a resource that's not covered by US CDI, and wanted to write a test to basically confirm that the elements were there that we were expecting. We have a lot of folks that are really good test analysts. They're very good at scripting. They can do a lot, but GitHub and Ruby and the programming is probably just over the the threshold where they would be comfortable. So that's sort of the use case we'd be looking at, to be able to add a test for a new file resource, or to add tests to an existing one, completely outside of the testing for US CDI or for Cures Act, just to take advantage of this great platform that's been developed.
The dog,
Fantastic.
and yeah, also, well, we do have a code generator that they can read the implementation guide, the structure definition of an implementation guide to generate some text automatically. And we have used that for US core. It works pretty well with US core, and we also tested that with IPS, kindly worked. So it's a kind of depend on what is the structure definition you put in for the profile and in the IG. So it can do some work, but may not do all of them, but at least reduce some work from handwriting those code. So if you, so maybe we can, you can chat offline to see that if we can help with using the code generator to automatically generate some text.
Okay, thanks for that advice.
Yep. Okay, so well, we have a 4
But
minute
even
left.
I just wanted to say too, Yanwei, even with that code generator, right? The documentation isn't great around that, right?
Yeah,
I think
I know.
think there's a lot of we're going to be doing over the next few months. We're going to be focusing a lot on our documentation and improving sort of our resources. And speaking of, I'm going to post the YouTube link for where we're posting our Inferno framework sort of items. We don't have enough subscribers to have a custom URL yet, but there it is. Please subscribe.
Okay. So we have about, sorry, I have only about the 3 minutes left. I don't know if we can, we have about the, so we have done these, we have done the bear token, we have 2 tasks left. So do you want to continue or want to move
I think
to the next class?
Yeah, I think we can wrap up at this point to just respect people's time. But
yeah. So at the end, I do have a, well, those are most of the URLs I already posted in the chat. So in case you want to do some do your homework at home, you can use those information. Yep, that's for me.
yeah, fantastic. And if folks have any sort of more suggestions like Doug had for how this tool could be more useful for you, or sort of things that we could focus on in the coming months, please, feel free to share them here, or you can always share them on the GitHub page, the Inferno Google groups, or by sending us an email. My email is john.bender@hhs.gov. So feel free to shoot me an email, and then I'm going to also put Scott Bohan@hs.gov. Our emails are pretty easy to guess. If that's
I'll type my email here.
Yeah, and then Yanwei is going to put his email too. So feel free to email us if you have any suggestions or things that we could work on that would make this easier to use. Again, realize that this is there is not a small amount of sort of a learning curve that goes into this, because you have to get a dev environment set up and stuff. So very willing to to work on things that makes that a more of a seamless process. So appreciate it, y'all.
Well, thank you very much. And if you have any comments and feedback, like what Johnny said, let us know. So we'll can get improved the next time.
Yeah, and we'll be trying to sort of do progressive sessions as well. So we're going to start. I think even the next session we might take a step back and go a little simpler. But we'll try and cover sort of different topics at each session if folks are interested in attending more. So it won't always be the same. So thanks.
Thank you very much.
All right, have a good one, everyone. Oh, nice. Thanks, AJ. Yeah, a list of error codes or details on error scenarios and a Postman collection. I think those are 2.
Yeah, for those one, you can, so AJ, in the documentation, you can start from the assertion and result. Those going to talk to you about how do you do the assertion and what the result is. So we have pass, fail, skip, etc., etc. And then you can, if you want to do deeper can look the API documentation.
But is
And
there a
also-
list of, AJ, you were asking for like a reference list of error codes?
Yeah. I mean, generally in a documentation, they put out all the error codes possibly. It's more like a directory or an index of error codes here.
Oh, for that one, we don't, because the arrow is so well different based on the profiles and also based on the input where the server returns. So we'll use assert with the different level of assert, and we have the detailed documentation as detailed as possible, a message with the assert, so we like know so what's wrong in there. For example, a quick example. So in here, if you look the patient, though it's passed, it's going to show some warnings and infos about what if there's something uncertain or something need to pay attention to. So arrow will be very similar. So going to have, but just have a type is arrow, and there's a message to tell you where the wrong, which resource is wrong and why it is wrong.
Okay.
And
I mean,
are
like,
these, oh, I was gonna say, are these errors generated from the validator mostly?
Yeah, most of arrows are generated from validator. Well, for this one, because of the type is called validation, right? So definitely arrow is coming from validator. And in the previous one, when we saw that it returns the 401, that's the arrow generated from the request HTTP, Fire client request response module. So there's an arrow generated from the different libraries, but they are all going to be shown here in the similar format.
Yeah, it'd be nice if we could like sort of compile all the different, because I'm sure each of the libraries lists their errors that are possible. It'd be nice if we could like compile those together or something. Or at least provide like a link, right, to the source of the error whenever it's presented here, because we sort of show the error, but we don't really show enough context, right?
Yeah, maybe.
I know those are just some ideas.
Mhm.
Would that help at all, AJ?
yeah, obviously now it won't go the first way. So we need to have some debugging material. So yeah. So it'll definitely help for us to refer a list, and we can at least understand, okay, why we are getting that error. Yeah. Because sometimes it might be a new error, and if we don't have a documentation to fall back, it'll become difficult, and we might have to reach out to you probably, just a lot of.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a really, really great suggestion. I super appreciate that. I'll push the team on figuring out some way to help.
Okay, yeah.